Welcome to the place where single shine, celebrating life, divine by design, in faith and love, we intertwine. Route 77, where your journey's prime.
Welcome to the Route 77 podcast. Today we're diving into a topic that's been trending all over social media, especially on TikTok. Something people are calling chronically single. Now that term might sound like a condition, right? But is being single for a long time really a problem? Or are we just getting caught up in a negative narrative? When we talk about something being chronic, it's usually not a positive thing. So today, let's explore what that really means for those of us who are single and why it might not be as negative as it seems. Welcome to the Route 77 podcast. I am your host, Natasha, and I am here with Monique.
Hello.
And David.
Hello.
And as always, I spend time on social media, articles, TikTok, and the thing that's trending right now is a topic called chronically single.
Sounds like a disease.
That's a thing. So basically the question is being single for an extended period really a problem, or are we just buying into a negative narrative? And when you say something is chronic, yeah, that's exactly negative.
Permanent, though.
Exactly.
No?
Basically, it's
Yeah.
ongoing. And
Yeah. Amber has chronic pancreatitis, which means that it'll always be with her, and symptoms can show up, and she always has to manage it. It's a disease.
Yep.
It's a bad.
And I have a chronic nerve pain. So I don't always have it, but I
That's
always have, I always have to take medication to keep it at bay. There's flare-ups that happen regularly. It's something that
Isn't it?
will be there
Yeah.
forever.
Isn't it attached to your muscle? Can you not
I
pull?
wish that,
Like
I wish
the
you
doctors
just
know
pull the
why?
muscle up.
they don't really know. One neurologist, the original one I saw, said they call it atypical facial nerve pain, but he's not 100% sure why it's happening, and it might just go away one day, but it might not. That's all they can tell me. With nerve pain, it's really hard to specifically tell what's being affected. The other neurologist I saw when I got the steroid shot, which did not help, he said he did a few tests and said it's not the muscle, but the nerve being impinged somewhere in between some things. So it's an impingement of the nerve. I talked to
I knew someone in high school who had chronic pain, and what happened was that the nerve would attach itself to the muscle. That's what was causing the pain. And she went through this for years until the doctors missed it. They could pull the nerve away from the muscle, and then the pain would vanish. But it would slowly go back and reattach, and they would have to keep doing it.
I was told by several doctors, like GPs, basically that it's very difficult to specifically diagnose nerve pain so that they can treat it specifically, because it's there's so many contributing factors. I talked briefly to a personal trainer because I was looking at what that would cost and stuff, and I had mentioned this, and I thought perhaps it was from a car accident that I had. But he was actually saying that from his experience with dealing with people with injuries and stuff, that what I'm talking about sounds more like it's something that I have an issue with, smaller openings where the nerves go, and something may have just impacted it a little more, which is the car accident maybe, but it's more like I was already leaning towards that anyway, which when I think
Okay.
about it, it's pretty much just on the one side. But when I do have issues, sometimes with the other side, the pain follows the same path, although it's not the same type of debilitating flare-up, but it follows the same pathway. I'm wondering if I'm having some sort of inflammation somewhere in it. So there's all of these things. For me, this chronic thing, I am pretty much 99% okay. I'm still unsure why I get flare-ups. I think sometimes it has to do with air pressure that can cause nerve inflammation. If I have a smaller than normal passage between whatever it is that the nerve's going through, then if it flares up, that makes sense. If I don't hydrate enough, it seems to be an issue too. If I don't take the nerve pain med, I have constant pain. The minimal pain is if you go swimming and you breathe in some chlorinated water and you get that burning up your nose. That feels like that constantly. That's the low end of the pain. But if I take the nerve pain meds, that's not there. And sometimes I try to go off
Okay.
the nerve pain meds, even just a little bit, because one is like a little 3-pill one. So I'm taking 2 pills just because the doctor said it could just go away one day. But you don't know if you never stop taking the nerve pain meds.
Yeah.
Even going down to 2, I can feel it after a couple of days, the burning heart sensation coming back.
And then you get a sudden nerve pain attack again, and then you're done.
Yeah, exactly. It's frustrating because I know that one of the side effects of taking these nerve pain meds is weight gain. What can you do? But also one of the side effects is that you get decreased migraines. I'll take it.
Bonus.
I'll take it because I
So-
migraines. So anyway, long story short, chronic generally means something that you're going to have to deal with on an ongoing basis, and you're going to have to treat it or deal with it or modify your life. Medication, modify your lifestyle, all of these things, but it's never in a positive way. It's never, no, I've got chronic this, so this is awesome. It's usually we'll say it if they're being facetious, so they're like chronically optimistic, but that's being like, it's very sarcastic when you say things like that.
Is your sarcastic meter going?
There should be one just on the side, and we just
She is just chronically happy all the time.
right.
I can't stand it. So you could make it a positive spin if you want.
Yeah. But generally, if you add the word chronic onto it, it's not positive. When I was reviewing TikTok, I saw a few articles on it and I listened to a couple podcasts about it. I would say 99% of the TikToks I saw, articles I read, podcasts I listened to, 99.9% were women. I think I saw 2 guys talk about it. I was listening through TikToks like for a couple hours.
Oh, no.
I think there's different reasons for this. What I found to be interesting too, when I was watching the TikToks, it was largely, but not only, but largely women in their early to mid 20s.
They're so young.
I know. So the fact is that they're like, I'm 22 and I've never had a single date. I've never had my first kiss. I'm 25 and I've never been in a relationship. I'm 29. I've seen them. And here I am, 29, going on 30, and I've never been in a relationship. And it's just, then there were people who were 30s and 40, but it was, it diminished the amount of people that did it at that later stage. So when you get to the 30s and 40s, sometimes it's not that they've never had it, although there were. It was that it had been a significant amount of time since they had ever been in a relationship. It could have been like 7, 8, 9 years. So they have had a relationship or two, but it's been a significant amount of time. And what I found interesting,
I'm longer than you. 2007.
you can add all the time,
And that one doesn't count.
I had 0 up until 30, and then from 30 to 40, and then 0 since then. So I think it's a gap, but it was very unhealthy. Anyway, Delta,
You probably beat me then.
so that was another trend I saw. It was interesting to see that it was young people saying that. And there is a sense that women do feel their biological clock's ticking, where even if you're like 25, you're sitting there going, it's not like I'm even in a relationship to think about having kids yet. The other thing I saw, I can talk about too, with like what a lot of things that they were frustrated with people telling them. But the other thing I saw when I was looking through, it was more of a podcast TikTok. So they're talking, part of it probably just a flip from a podcast. But basically this one guy was saying like, do you think it's a red flag if a woman hasn't had a significant relationship in 3, 4+ years? And they were saying, yeah, it is. And the girl are sitting there, no, it could just be that they're waiting or that they haven't found the right person that they want to. But from the guy's perspective in a single podcast clip, the 2 guys on there agreed that it was actually a red flag if a woman hadn't had a date, wasn't dating or in a significant relationship in more than 3 or 4 years.
Why would it be a red flag?
Because maybe there's something wrong with them. So that was the other thing I noticed.
There's multiple factors to that. Their expectations for a partner could be in the top 1%. And they're not going to find anyone because every time they do try to meet someone, it's just, oh, these are not to my standards. I'm going to move on. Then years go by and you're like, oh, I'm chronically single. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
What you're looking for is somewhat flawed.
It is. What's interesting too is that so many of, I would say probably 60 or 70% of the TikTok videos that I went through, and I went through it for a few hours just listening to them, different ones, actually mentioned the fact that they were not into hookup culture. They weren't going to just go and kiss a guy for the sake of kissing a guy, go home with a guy just to go the sake of going home with a guy. They actually mentioned that as a reason. they had some standards about what they were doing. But what is interesting is that
which is
we
good.
see if you're not into that culture or into even secular culture, like when you watch movies and TV, you feel like everybody else must be into this hookup culture because of the amount that you're shown this as being normal.
The media
Portray it like this is what everybody is doing. And then you see this going like that culture is not for me. I don't want to just do that. I want to actually have a romantic connection with the person. I actually want to have beyond the physical connection.
they want a meaningful relationship.
And they want it to go beyond just like you swiped right on Tinder. So those are the 3 trends that I saw as I was listening to several. I was playing some video games while I was listening, so I wasn't just like staring at TikTok.
Right.
But I was listening to.
The funny thing about hookup culture is that it's got its own pitfalls. I applaud these girls for having some respect for themselves to not want to get into that hookup culture, because it takes a lot when the media is blasting you with just do it. And they're saying, no, I don't want to do it. I want to have some meaning in my relationship. That shows character. But sadly, in our society, people don't respect that. They say, if you don't want to put out, then why am I putting up with you?
And like even one girl's talking about how like it's such an expectation that at a first date that you end up in bed.
Yeah.
It's in.
Yeah, I paid for your dinner, so what are you going to reward me with?
So like a lot of people who I'd say probably half of the TikToks I listened to was the people doing the variation of this because they saw another one and they want to do it for their age group. So there's like 25, 23, 39. They were basically saying, as a chronically single person, I am 100% sick of people saying these top 5 things. So
what are these top 5 things?
If I had to rate like Family Feud, like survey says, in the very top one,
starting at number 5.
Actually, let's start with the top one because that's better to talk about. So the survey says the very, very top answer was, it'll come when you least expect it. They said they were just like so sick. They're like, how am I supposed to not least like how am I or when you're not looking for it? Those 2.
What is that implying?
Not.
You're not supposed to do anything? You're just supposed to wait?
I know, that's what the people are like. Am I supposed to lock myself in the house and hope they drop in?
Yeah, I don't even think the person that being said to doesn't know what that means because like, that's why they're so
One
upset.
girl's like, am I supposed to blindfold myself because I'm already not expecting it, so I'm supposed to not expect it more and just like blindfold myself so I really don't expect it?
I actually had that said to me quite a number of times.
Me too.
The thought I have behind that is you're supposed to go about with your life, go out with your friends, do things. If you meet somebody, then maybe that's the one, but don't go looking around your neighborhood going, are you the one? Are you the one? Maybe you're the one. Are you the one? Maybe you're the one. Are you the one? You're just supposed to let yourself be yourself and it will come to you. If love is supposed to be in your cards,
You need to actively observe too.
Yeah.
Yeah. You
like
do.
one girl,
one
girl was like, I don't know how to do that because I'm expecting it everywhere. I go to the grocery store and I'm like, are you the one? Are you the one? Are you the one?
Like what I just said, right?
Even in a grocery store situation, you can actually determine what kind of person someone is based on how they're treating staff.
Yeah.
And if you watch any Asian dramas that I do, if you're in the grocery store with your shopping cart, you just might turn a corner and crash into them because that's happened too.
I always crash into little old ladies or on-the-go moms, not hot guys that are single.
But no, right?
As you drop, you're like free in slow motion. And
what are you going to crash into the next billionaire just around the corner shopping in an everyday grocery store?
One person not under their time.
And it's really good. He'd just be the one that will catch you before you hit the floor.
Golden card.
Well, if you're single and all your friends are married, then remember this. A lot of them are married to poor people and you can still marry a rich guy.
That's called the 1%. Good luck.
1 out of 5.
I may not be married because I'm not married to a poor person. Like,
there you go. Look at the positive side of it.
Yeah, so that's definitely, and I have heard that one about it'll come when you least expect it. But then, especially in the Christian culture, you're told to want it. So you feel like you're trying to play this game of I'm not looking, but I'm looking. But you're not sure where to look or how to look, but you're not looking, but you are.
Right.
It's like this game, and you don't want them to know that you're actually looking at them. So you're constantly looking away.
It's like that person out on the street wearing all sorts of really strange clothes. And you're just, what am I looking at? I'm not looking because looking is rude. But I want to look, but I can't. But I have to, God, but I can't because it's rude. Don't look. It's the kind of thing, right?
Emergency situation. Just have a white cane with you.
There you go.
I'm not really
I'm
looking.
not really looking.
I can't see anything. I'm blind. I can't see anything. That's good.
Bump
Oh,
into
my
the
word.
person.
Probably the second most said one was a mix of these two, but it's just the same way of saying the thing. One is that your standards are too high, or two, that you are being too picky.
We've gone with this one before with in another podcast
Oh,
where
yeah.
people have said, you're just being too picky. You've got to lower your standards.
And you're like, there's standards for a reason.
When you married your husband, how low were your standards?
They were desperate.
The wrong standards. They're using the wrong measure.
Your standards are desperation level.
There's a lot you throw out.
I was telling somebody the other day, I was so infatuated and in love with my ex. My rose-colored glasses were so red I couldn't see the red flags.
And that's pretty much what it is, isn't it? Is that those red rose? And I had the same thing because the one thing that I ignored that I really shouldn't have is that he wasn't gainfully employed.
Mhm.
He hadn't been able to hold down a job. And how is somebody supposed to have any kind of sense of responsibility if they can't hold down a job for longer than a couple months?
My ex is the same. He never made it past the 3-month probation with any company. So that's why
Yeah,
he
see,
worked for
that's
himself.
a really
And
good
it's
flag.
not like they couldn't get a job or they're not trying to get a job, but there's a reason why they couldn't work with people.
I used to work at where I'm working right now at the fireplace store. And there's a couple of people there who had actually worked with him. When a PSA was your husband, couldn't have been really that bad. I says, talk to John. He'll tell you. Talk to Ken. He'll tell you. Oh, yes.
People there have dealt with my ex as well. When they complain about him, just say at least you weren't married to him for 10 years.
You weren't married to him. Yeah, no. Yeah, no. Thank goodness for that. And it's crazy because when you are that desperate, your standards, you will lower them because you think maybe if I took this or maybe if I took this out.
Especially when people tell you that. And
Yeah.
then you have people that tell you things like, because you might have preferences. And so
Right.
you actually
like
get,
dark hair, dark eyes.
but the thing is, you actually get people, and I had this happen to me, so I know this for a fact, that tell you you don't have to be attracted to them. That can come later.
I have a story on that one. I knew this lady a long time ago. She was telling me about her daughter she had a friend, a guy who was a best friend. They were best friends for years and years. They grew up together. And by the time she hit her 20s, she hadn't dated anybody. So they had this kind of, I don't know, agreement or whatever that if by a certain age they were still single, they'd marry each other. They were best friends. Let's get married. We're best friends. We get along really well together. When their marriage, when it came to any kind of intimacy, they couldn't because they were only friends. They saw each other more like a brother, sister. There was nothing. Their whole marriage just fell apart because of that. So what do you think?
Yeah. And the thing is, most of the people who tell you it can come later didn't do that
didn't
with
come later.
but for them, they were attracted to the person they married. So they're telling you something just so that you can get married. Ignore the things that we had. Looks aren't everything, but God did give us attractions. And not everything.
And we have attractions for a reason.
Yeah.
Like we develop these ideals in our mind as we're growing up. There are things we know we are attracted to and things we know we're not attracted to. So for somebody to say, just throw out that because then you're more likely to find somebody you can marry. I do know that there's times where you meet somebody who may not be as attractive as you think you want somebody to be.
Mhm.
But as you get to know them, their attractiveness grows. I've seen that in movies where they've got this guy. I never thought this guy was attractive in any way, shape, or form. It's just like, why would you choose this guy as an actor for this movie next to Sandra Bullock, who is a beautiful woman? This guy was just not there. By the time the movie started, his character changed his appearance and he actually became attractive at the end. I can see how that can happen
Yeah. But that
if
usually
the guy's got
happens
really good.
if that happens usually before you marry. Not
Yeah.
like it might come, it might whatever, as long as I'm married.
Yeah, I know you're ugly now. We'll get married, and maybe once we're married and we get to know each other, maybe something will not get that long before you get married.
Yeah. And what if they thought that about me? I wouldn't feel super great if they're like, I'm just hoping our personality comes through.
And that's the thing too, is I may not be the most gorgeous person on the planet, but I think I've got some pretty good qualities. My late husband had a lot to say about what I look like. If there is somebody that I meet, they will think I'm beautiful because in their eyes, that's what they see,
Mhm.
right? And it's the same for you, and it's the same for David. If you meet somebody to marry, that person will already have chosen you because you meet their characteristics of what they want, and you same with them, right? It's not just I'm the old Dave because I need somebody to marry. That's not going to work out for you. Did that make sense?
Yes, it did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
I just think that when people say that, it really puts the marriage
Yeah.
at such, it's so necessary that
Right.
you have to let go of these things.
And you're saying you don't.
And I think if you want there to be a very specific thing, then maybe you will be single. But that's
Yeah.
not such a bad thing. If you say that you want a person who does X, Y, and Z in a sense of they're honest, they love the Lord, they like these things, if they don't fit those, then you don't marry them. Like,
And that's a big thing right there that you just mentioned is if you're a Christian guy or girl and the person you are attracted to that you want to marry is not somebody who shares your faith, that's just a recipe for disaster.
Mhm.
They have this saying about the ox and the yoke. If you ever see that in the old films where they've got two oxen and they got the yoke across their shoulders and they're plowing the field, if one ox has the yoke and the other one doesn't, then they're just going to go around in circles.
what happens is like if you don't pair them properly, one is stronger than the other and they'll go in the direction of the stronger one. So you'll always be pulled
Right.
off. That's why it's important when they did pair oxen that they were equal.
So that's where that analogy comes from. Farmers understand that. City people don't understand that. But let me put it in a city folk kind of way. If you've got a car and two different sized tires, you are not going to be driving in a straight line.
No, you're going to go the
That's right.
So the next one I would say that was mentioned the most, the next most, maybe you should just put yourself out there more. And then people are
What
going,
does that mean?
what do you want me to do? I'm going to bars, I'm going to clubs, I'm going to this place and that place. I'm not going out there because I really want to go out there. I'm going to meet people. Like,
And is a bar a really good place to meet? You got the chronic alcoholics. Oh, this is good.
as long as you're all chronic together.
Yeah, I've got chronic singleness. It will be a good match.
If we can fix the chronic singleness, maybe we can fix the chronic alcoholism. But even then, if people are sitting there going, I'm not exactly hiding in my basement, like I'm out there. But then they say things like, you'll get it when you least expect it or don't go looking for it. But at the same time, put yourself out there.
It's that ambiguous kind of do or don't. It's either I do it or I don't. Tell me what I'm supposed to be doing because you're confusing me now. I know that as somebody who would be considered chronically single because I've been single for 20 years, 20 some odd years. That's a long time to be single. I haven't kissed a guy in a long time.
I'm coming up on 10 years.
Since you kissed a guy, David?
God, yeah.
Since you kissed a guy, another guy.
Just tease him, David. Just tease him.
Fine.
I have been to numerous different churches. I've gone to concerts. I've gone to shopping centers. I've gone to malls. I've gone to parks. I've gone to events. I've been everywhere, man. No, I have yet to meet somebody. I'm so sad.
Right?
I'm not. Do I sound like I'm
Right.
sad? No.
Hey, I did not have a relationship until I was 30, and that was my ex. And I got divorced when I was 40, and I am 44, almost 45.
That was 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I remember that day.
Yeah.
You told us. What?
She was divorced before she even knew she was single. So
Yeah, it was weird. So I definitely, I don't know. I am not like putting myself out there in the sense of trying to put myself in the way of possibilities. Like going out to events as much, or because I'm working all this time. Like when you're single and you have to work 2 jobs or a job and a half, you don't really have the time or energy, especially as you get older. You're just like, I just want to eat popcorn and sit on my couch. Like that's
Dating is just too much like work.
it's okay. I'm not really looking. I'm just living where God has me in the moment. So but it's just funny because like they sit there. It's just frustrating if people say these things. And then another one, being single is a blessing. Enjoy your freedom, especially if you really want to be married. Yes, we believe that being single is a blessing and being married is a blessing. And they're two gifts on different paths, different roads. But when you're constantly being told, like when you're desperately looking to get married, and this is what you're being told, it's hard to see it because you're never actually taught how to be single and how to embrace it. But they always say, enjoy your freedom, especially when you're told that by people who are in relationships.
Married with a bunch of children.
And you're like, I'm trying to enjoy my freedom, but what does that mean? Because apparently I'm supposed to be out there looking, but not looking. What kind of freedom is that? Don't look, but look. They're like, I don't know. The way it's said, it's not usually in the way that we talk about it. It's like a platitude.
Right.
It'd be like, it's okay that you're single.
Enjoy
Your freedom, whatever that means. Because, yeah, like I said,
You have no idea what it's like to be in a relationship with all these kids running around your feet. Enjoy the freedom while you got it.
and there's people who are like, will tell them things like, I wish I were single. You're so lucky. Or like when they say things like that, my word. But when they talk about, at least you didn't have to deal with my ex, like have this bad relationship. And they're like, okay, like you don't have to not ever be in a car accident to wish you had a car if you don't have one. Just because a person has been through toxic relationships doesn't mean that other person's going to do that. And to just say you're so lucky that you haven't been through the horrible stuff. But a lot of people are like, that's a weird thing to say to people because it's like, that's not the guarantee.
It's almost like they're saying you have avoided the curse of being in a bad relationship.
Because that's the
I mean,
obvious
there-
thing
there
that's going to
is-
happen. It does happen.
Yeah.
But it's not like the guaranteed outcome
does.
of looking for a spouse.
No, and it doesn't mean that's going to happen to that person.
If they were like, oh, I wish I had a car, and you're like, oh, you're so lucky you don't because I had a car accident one time. It would seem like a weird thing to say, but
I got a really bad speeding ticket, so you'll
so
consider
lucky.
yourself lucky.
Yeah, and it's just that's a weird thing to say, but then they'll say it to you about a relationship. I couldn't tell you how many people told me how lucky I was to have my ex.
Oh,
I just
yes.
wanna-
He's so handsome and he's so personable.
He treats me
Yeah,
so well. He looks-
yeah, you're only seeing what he wants you to see.
Yeah. But it works both ways. So I try not to say, oh, you're so lucky to have each other because as far as I know, they have a healthy relationship, but I also don't want to pile it on if it's not.
Yeah.
But yeah,
You're so lucky you've got all these kids and they seem so well behaved. Yeah, they're only well behaved because we're outside of the house.
right. Another thing that people say is you must be lucky to be single because you can focus on your career, your education, your personal growth. Or they say you need to love yourself before others can love you. And they're like, I love myself. I'm the best person on the planet.
That's humbling.
Right.
Not.
But when you're chronically single and they tell you to love yourself for 10 years, then you're like, what are you supposed to say?
I'm starting to not love myself anymore. After 10 years, I'm done.
I'm done
That's it.
living with myself.
Myself is not so fun. Myself is boring. We're divorcing. We're going to divorce myself now.
One woman was like, I'd marry myself if I could, but
That's another weird story. I've
Yeah.
women who've done that.
I feel like if you went down that route, you'll end up divorcing yourself as well.
yeah, probably.
Yeah.
But I think it's just like
Yeah.
a weird thing to say to somebody. People that should have good self-esteem, but a lot of these things are said with a grain of positivity. When it's said constantly, it means nothing, or it has a lot of
Right.
negative connotations. By saying that you need to love yourself or focus on this, that, and the other thing, then it's saying, how do you know that I don't love myself or I don't have positive self-esteem?
How can I do that? How can I love myself? Suggesting it, they should know how one does love themselves. And I
Not
think
bad.
what a lot of people misunderstand is in order to love yourself, you need to love others first.
I think there are people out there who have a lot of self-esteem issues and are like they sit there, but a lot of that comes from years of being told you're supposed to be in a relationship. And then you go for these quote unquote chronically single people, which have gone for years without ever having a single person ever ask them out on a date or whatever. And then they go, there must be something wrong with me. And so it's hard to keep up when they're sitting there like, you just got to put yourself out there more. And you're sitting there going, I put myself out there, or you have to stop looking for it. And you're like, I'm trying, or it's just like when they say these things, like you eventually, that's actually what chips away your self-esteem.
When there's a different truth involved in looking for the one, looking for the soulmate, your chances of running into the person you're going to fall in love with is pretty much 1 in a billion. The odds are really bad. And in our society, it's even worse. If you're a Christian person, the amount of people going into church or leaving churches, the statistics are really bad. So it's not your fault if you're single.
Sometimes there's things that you do, but who's perfect and doesn't have a flaw? Like they're too loud or they're too bossy, or there's things that you work on always on yourself. But it doesn't.
I get told all the time that I hate when people say that to me.
My ex used to say
Well,
that I never talked, and then I talked too much.
Yeah, I always got told to be quiet. When you see a lot of these girls who say that they're single, I don't see anything wrong with them. So I'm pretty sure that the love yourself more is something that they really don't need to hear. We have a girl in our church. She's very pretty. She's been divorced now 4 years, but she's got kids. She struggles, but for her, I don't see her singleness as because there's something wrong with her. What I think, it's just the way it is in today's society. It's hard to find somebody to marry, whether you're male or female. And it's not because of your standards, but because of availability. People around our age who have our level of activity and mental perception, that emotional IQ, there's not that many around. For the young 20s, most of those people, they're stuck in their video games or they're on their own social media, and they spend all their time there rather than learning how to interact with people. And that's one of the things that I read too, is that a lot of young people, because of their cell phones, are not really good at interacting with people socially. We've lost
You
the
know
art
what?
of what?
For the World Wide Web and its hope in connecting the world, it sure has disconnected it more than anything.
It has, because people spend all their time in social media or staring at their phones and playing video games, that they don't know how to interact with people anymore. They don't know how to talk to people. They don't know how to connect with people.
And I think COVID just added a little bit onto that.
They did, because we were isolated for so long. We weren't allowed to go out. We weren't allowed to see people
Even
distant.
the face masks on too. So like I still see some young people wearing face masks all
There's
the
still
time.
people. Yeah, exactly. I see the same thing. Yeah.
I honestly don't think COVID was a massive factor in it. I think it was just icing on the cake. I think we've already done the damage prior to COVID.
I think it
Yeah,
just,
we were
I
all
think
there.
it just helped move things along quicker that way.
Yeah.
Icing
Like
on the
there's
cake.
still young people, mid to late teens, that still wear masks. And it has nothing to do with them being worried about catching COVID or anything else. It is simply the fact that they like the fact that they're more anonymous with it on, that people can't read their
Yeah.
expressions. And they literally said that to me as to why they
Yeah,
were wearing
yeah.
it. And this is what I had several young people tell me, because they
Yeah,
didn't like
yeah,
people being
yeah.
able to read their expressions. And they were more used to being expressive with their face, knowing that they had the mask on. Without the mask, it was just something that sped along. But I'm just saying that's a thing.
They purposely made themselves invisible to other people.
And then one of the last things I'll mention that they talked about, and we can talk about other things, more positive view of singleness, is that they get asked, why have you tried online dating? This is a new concept that nobody has ever thought about before.
What? Monique
Right.
pointed out social media and TikTok and all this stuff is disconnecting us.
But people literally come and ask, have you tried online dating? And they're like, no, I've never even heard of this online dating you speak of, because it's so obvious. Most people have tried multiple times on different sites and paid and all this type of stuff.
And there may be the 1 in 1,000 who actually find somebody to be with, but 99% of the time, are predators on these online dating sites.
I feel like the only time it actually works is not where you expect it. Maybe you're playing an online video game and then you meet your wife or husband on that game. But it happens when you're doing something that both of you enjoy, that you can connect over, not some site that just connects random people and tries to make it work.
And
Yeah.
it's just
I know.
how much things like Tinder and Grinder and all these one night stand hookup, find the person that's closest to you to connect physically with, have been so popularized. But yet they're actually losing interest in us because, like I said, there's a pushback against the hookup culture that is out there because people are finding that it's not as fulfilling as they were told.
I know two people who met through an online gaming, and both of them did get married, strangely enough. One of them was able to get married young enough to have kids and are now in our church, and he actually works on our production thing. I don't know how common that is because how many people are true to who they are on these gaming sites.
It's the same with anything. You might
Yeah.
be doing a sport and you meet somebody, or you might be doing
Yeah.
like wine tour and meet somebody. Like it's the gaming side. There is a thriving community within some of these games where they have groups that talk and spend a lot of time together. I can see how that would develop because you're spending time together, you're on chat and you're having conversations that turn from the game to life because you've spent so much time with them. So I think like it's definitely a possibility, but what it is like you're not going to go, I'm going to get because I'm going to find my spouse. That's not why you do it, but it's a
That's not
potential to
Yeah.
find it.
because I know my best friend Michelle that I grew up with since I was 12 never got married. She is a little bit older than me. For the first time, she actually met somebody that she now got married to. But she met him through a game they played together. But they talked for years before they actually met and determined to have a relationship. It wasn't an automatic thing. They were casually having conversations while playing their game. And then eventually it turned into sharing more. It happened over a long period of time.
I have several people on Facebook that I met, like they're just women or whatever, through a game that we basically led this like club part of the game that they always have in these games. And there's I don't know none of us any play like game any longer. And yet we're part of each other's lives on Facebook in a way that we would never have done otherwise. I've never met them in person, yet we know somewhat intimately about each other's lives because we do post on Facebook and we do comment. We'll be like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Do you need anything? I'm praying for you. You find these things out and you have conversations. So I think there's just so many things wrong with what people say. We did that whole episode early on. So recapping it is fine. I think
There is one of the things that you wrote down here for this podcast, singleness as a calling. This is interesting because a lot of people do not like to hear that singleness could be a calling, that you may just be called. Because what people were saying is that if that singleness cannot be a calling because you have to be called to be celibate. And who's called to be celibate? You're not a unit. There was a conversation that happened about the whole thing. The funny thing was one woman was commenting and then I picked up something that she'd said. She said, that when she was single, people would say, so I thought, well, why are you commenting on here now that you're married? Because this is about single things. And then I actually went into her profile page and she was actually miserable in her marriage. She was married, but she was still depressed. She was still lonely and she was still gaming. And her husband was doing all this other, like he was working and doing stuff. And she wasn't spending time with him. You really have to monitor yourself, see yourself as to what it is that you are really so desperate about wanting to be married for. Is it because you think it's going to cure your loneliness? It's not.
this is actually I want to
Do you think
do
it's going-
on the next podcast is talk about expectations of what we expect
Right.
marriage to be. There's a lot of misconception, negative expectations or non-biblical expectations that we have. I want to do a podcast
Right.
with that.
What you commented on, it was revealed to me that this scenario is unique enough that it says, look, if a person is single, but then they try to get married, they're making an actual choice that they're going to get married. Like the person you mentioned who's got married, but they still ended up miserable.
Right.
So in this case, her calling, Christ may have called her to be single, but freely choosing to go and get married But freely choosing, regardless if you're Christian or not, the calling still applies.
Okay.
God will call you because he knows you, but you still have the ability to choose which path to take. What happens is that people choose to take another path because they don't know God. Their life is pretty much chaos.
I agree with you. But in my life, I think God was calling me in a life of singleness. If you're single, that God's calling you into singleness in that moment. And he may not be calling you out of singleness at the time you choose to get married, which I did. I'm not saying that God would never have called me to marriage or will never call me to marriage, but I believe I manufactured the marriage part as opposed to allowing God to bring it to me if it was his
I
time.
think I did the same.
And so, like David said, I specifically chose the path of marriage, believing that I was doing the right thing. But again, when I look back, there was a lot of wrong belief systems or thinking that was there.
Yeah.
I believe that God calls you to singleness while you're single. It doesn't mean that he's not calling you to marriage at some point. But when, like David said, when you choose to do it on your own and not when God's calling it to be, then that's when things go wrong. Like we see that with Abraham, right? When God said he was going to have a son, he was like, okay, it's not happening. I must be the one that has to figure this out. And then we have Ishmael and we see this whole implication that comes from that. It was God calling him to be a father, but he chose to manufacture that instead of letting
Yeah.
God's calling meet up with him.
Okay, so
He,
you
he
have
was
to
waiting
keep
to
in
step
mind too, Abraham believed in God.
Yeah.
Abraham was a follower
Yeah.
and a prophet of God. People who appear sad or unable to find partners walk a life of uncertainty because they're without Christ. The Lord calls us, he allows us to choose our paths freely, but he may call one person to a path of marriage or a path of singleness. Because you don't trust in Christ, your life will become confused. You will become lost. You seek companionship from your peers, but because you do not know Christ, you do not know your calling. By Christ alone, you will know your calling. That's my point.
Mm-hmm.
But because these people don't know Christ, and their callings are unknown to them, their life is utter chaos.
Yeah.
And for me, I was a brand new Christian, and I had no mentorship around me. Like I had nobody who came alongside of me to walk with me into the life of Christ. I was trying to wade through the murky waters on my own. And that's where I fell into. When I look back now, chances are God was probably wanting me to be single for a while so that he could teach me, but I had nobody to teach me about the single Christian life.
And I grew up in
And
the church. I was a Christian for many years, but I was in the same boat. No one had ever
Yeah.
taught me what the healthy view of singleness was. And so
Right.
I stepped into an unhealthy view of marriage, which led to me making unhealthy and poor choices, which I still claim. Like
And I
I
think
know
this
that
is,
I made those decisions, but
yeah,
there was a lot of outward things as well that helped to form who I was.
exactly. And I think this is probably one of the places where I'm hoping our podcast will be of help to other people who find themselves in the same situation. I'm single, but I don't know how to do that. This is where we want to walk alongside these people and say, we know that feeling. Let's walk with you.
Mhm.
So that's another emphasis Christ made is,
Yeah.
like Monique, you just said, the church and community. If you are single, you have to come to the church and to the communities. Because what marriage provides in the sense of love other than a sexual relationship, the church can also provide. As depicted, the harmony between a husband and a wife, you can get the same harmony with the church.
Yeah. The thing that single people will tell you is that this is great on a Sunday, but they're still Monday to Saturday.
Mhm.
The church needs to know that you just can't walk alongside these people for a couple of hours on a Sunday morning. You need to take these single people under your wing and walk with them more times than just Sunday morning.
Like in a marriage, the husband and wife are in harmony together. They work together. They complete each other. As the church, as Christ's church, there has to be a two-way connection. If you or the church, like your analogy about doing the smaller and larger wheel, if one of you decides to put more effort in than the other, it might actually be the opposite effect. Both of you have to put the same amount of effort, or one of you is being dragged.
So the single people can't just sit there in the corner and go, oh, woe is me. You got to get yourself involved in the church too.
You can't just go to church on Sundays, do the sermon, then go home.
Right.
You can do
I
that
could-
every Sunday and then do nothing from Monday to Saturday.
Yeah. So I said in Matthew 6:33, it says, but seek first marriage. Oh, sorry, I misspoke there. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. It sounds platitudinal when you say look for God first and stuff, but it's not really about telling them what to do with their day-to-day life as opposed to what's the end goal. We kept thinking the end goal was marriage and kids. That was where my eyes were focused 100%. When you focus on anything that's not God, the better job, the Olympic medal, the anything that you focus on, as in that is the epitome of that's the be all and end all, that's my goal in life, then everything's going to not be enough. Can you ask how many Olympians got their gold medal and then it was like, now what?
Yep.
Like there's actually many Olympians who have medals where they're just sitting in a drawer because they thought it was the be all and end all. It's a great accomplishment and it's something to celebrate. But when you make something your goal,
The idol.
the idol in your life, your goal in life that isn't God, then like you're going to nothing. It's never going to meet the expectations you think it is, and it's not biblical.
It's also meaningless in nature.
How many trophies and medals have we gotten now from Taekwondo? And they're sitting on shelves collecting dust. Oh, yeah, great. I got this.
But in the end, it's meaningless because it's a materialized or this world act.
Yeah.
Right? By the time Christ comes or by the time you pass away, as it is written, your works in this world will have no meaning or value other than the grace of God.
Yeah.
If it's not Christ and his sacrifice, then it's not.
That's the exact reason I started taking my master's, because I was realizing that while I love Taekwondo and sports and the challenges of getting to my different black belts, I was realizing that I was putting that much effort into something that was here on this world, but not into my faith. And I wanted to so that I was really convicted and challenged on that in my own heart about, nobody said it to me. I was just feeling it in my own heart that God gave me the ability in sports and he gave me the ability to teach and I love these things. It doesn't have lasting value. So I have to be putting in black belt level focus and energy for my faith first.
The desire, when one comes to belief, one desires most of all to know Christ even more. And that's exactly what happened to you, Natasha.
And look what's come from the following that calling or that conviction. It's like we've started this ministry. We've had over 80 podcasts in our library where we're trying to expand. We're doing these things and we really want to help. And even if we only have 3 or 4 or 5 listeners for an episode, hopefully we can help those 3 or 4 or 5 people. Just give them a goal and to refocus or reorient or to help understand where they are. And that as a person, we're broken. We're broken, sinful people. But as a person in the world that isn't married, it's not because you're broken. Like there's something wrong with you fundamentally as a mate or a potential spouse. That in a way we are broken as a sinful human person. But if you're not married, it doesn't mean that it's because you're too ugly or there's something like, or you have this flaw that makes you unlovable. But the thing, that's why I want to segue into the next episode, talking about expectations. If you focus marriage as your goal, your marriage and then kids, like once you reach those goals, it's now what? It usually falls flat because your ultimate goal was not God or his kingdom. Anything less than that is going to fall short. Your singleness will fall short. Your marriage will fall short. Your parental will fall short. Your job will fall short. Your sport will fall short. Like, none of these things are bad in and of themselves. But when they become an idol, then again, segue into next podcast. So next podcast, expectations. This way we won't talk too much about it and we can create a teaser. We'll be talking about expectations next podcast. So maybe this is a good place to end before we talk too much about that side of it. It's a good segue into that one. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Let us know. Message us. Find us on Insta. There must be a new one. Instagram. Insta. That's a new one. We should just start that one.
Facebook.
Instagram, Facebook, and X. And hopefully soon YouTube. We're trying to focus on creating a video podcast. So that's in our near future, hopefully. And yeah, find us on route77.ca.
Go to our website.
Yep, route77.ca, or email us at route77ministries@gmail.com. That's ROUTE 77ministries@gmail.com. And we will see you here next time.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. I hope this conversation about being chronically single has given you some food for thought and maybe even challenged the way you view singleness. Remember, singleness isn't a problem to be fixed. It's a season with its own unique opportunities and challenges. If you enjoyed this episode or have any thoughts you'd like to share, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, take care and remember to live your single life to its fullest.